Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back. Glad you could be here with us.
As we always are just so thrilled to have our family members with us.
Yes, and share what we understand about the reality in which we live.
Yeah, this has been a hard one to do. It's something I feel so important to get across. And yet it's so touchy, and we have a long message from the G-Fed and the Pleiadian High Council, which we'll share a little bit of, but we'll give you our version of as we unfold this. And what it is I want to try to get people to think outside the box, because we're put in a box as soon as we're born.
That's right. I mean, the second we come out of that womb, they're doing things to us to create a certain reaction. I've heard different stories about, like, if babies are actually born in water, they will not experience fear. And that's really curious, isn't it? Look what they do right when we come out of the womb. Whack. You get hit first thing.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah, exactly. Reality gets created through acts of observation. And we know from quantum physics, again, that in many ways our reality is waiting for us to notice it. And yet we have to look also at other factors. We have the observation point of it. How about the knowledge? Where does that knowledge come from? Well, in this world, typically it comes from school, comes from religious sources, your family, your friends, mainstream media, and, thankfully not so mainstream media as well. And we can see what's going on right now is a total control of information in such a massive way that it really could be likened very much so to the book burnings we saw in NAZI Germany, as the NAZI apostrophe S's were taking control of the situation. We've had a video removed like every day, it seems, sometimes more than one video removed. It's definitely ramping up. Why? Because there's this need to control the narrative. If you program certain knowledge in, and it's in your head, even if you're not really thinking about it, you've just been exposed to it, it distorts and changes your version of reality.
It sure does. And when that distortion is going on and it's ongoing as we grow in life, then everything else is just completely formed for us. We're spoon-fed from such a young age. And how do you break out of that, really?
Well, it's about seeing through a clear lens and not the distorted lens that they give us.
Yeah, that's pretty distorted.
Yeah, and so our reality is distorted. Especially, again, if our reality is formed by listening to the mainstream media, reading mainstream papers, really believing what you're given. For instance, going by what Wikipedia says now, it seems to be the new gospel.
Yep. The new gospel.
It's the new gospel.
The new Godspell.
Godspell?
Yes.
Did you say Godspell?
I did.
Yes, it's the gospel of Godspell.
And it very much has us framed in this place that we can't really break out of. And why is that? Spells will do that to you.
Absolutely. As we are taught in school, spelling. Mm-hmm. How to spell for others. Mm-hmm. And get others caught up in the web. It's a tangle web. It's a real tangle web. It's distorted. And I could see in comments, there are some people that just cannot see the forest for the trees.
Oh, they're afraid to. And, because it also plays into our ego. And our ego helps us so much with survival. And that's a very important thing. We do need to survive. So it's a difficult thing to break out of.
So when you look at a picture, what do you see? What do you guys see? You might say sheep, mountains, a herder, a shepherd. And what does this make you feel? You might say anything from, comfortable, warm, loving to hungry to, well, that's going to make a nice, wool sweater. Can we put ourselves into the sheep's point of view? If they're eventually going to be culled, and eventually, there you go. They're going to be clothes and in somebody else's belly. Maybe it's a little bit easier if we look at it this way. Maybe it's a little more familiar to us in the U.S. of A. And you notice there's a mark. Yeah, they're branded. They're somebody's. They're somebody's property. They have a brand on them. Now, we know we could look to the Bible, right, and say, well, yeah, I think we're seeing the mark right now of the beast right before our very eyes. What does that really mean? Does that mean a branding like your property? And if you go to Revelations 22, when it talks about New Jerusalem, that cube coming out of the sky, by the way, Mecca, the cube, let me hand off to Sin.
Right. That big, huge cube in the sky that we've heard about in certain literature. This is another thing that's kind of playing into our reality, coming into focus. What is up with this thing? That's pretty big, and that's a lot of people. That thing is getting a lot of energy right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's getting a lot of energy. And then when we think of, New Jerusalem coming out of the sky, it's basically cube as well. It's this, giant city coming out of the sky in a cube form again. Consciousness transferring. How about consciousness consuming? Uh-oh, that was something you had to be treading lightly on. Mm-hmm. But think about it. Where does that come from? And this, well, they're both part of the Abrahamic tradition. Of course, if you're Jewish or if you're Christian, you're not really paying attention to this. Now, if you're Christian, you're paying a big attention to this. But it's, again, part of the conditioning that we find ourselves under. And when we look to, Revelation 22, we find, let's see here. Yeah. I know they don't want to put that whole part in there. But this talks again. Okay, there you go. Okay. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will see him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. Their foreheads. So it's either the mark of the beast, or it's the mark, this mark, that is put on the foreheads. Marks used to brand cattle. Well, part of my flock, my sheep know me.
Right.
My flock, my sheep know me. What happens to the herd? What happens to the flock? What happens to the sheep eventually? Well, Cindy, when she was growing up, this was ribeye, this was hamburger, this was T-bone.
We did name them names like that. Yeah, hamburger, T-bone. Absolutely. It was to get children psychologically ready that this is what they're going to eat.
And life does feed off of life. And when we're talking about fourth density life, it feeds off of energies. Doesn't feed off of, food as we know it, so to speak. Perhaps lower densities can, and, there are technologies that can make it such that they can switch through densities and, change their vibrational frequency enough to become a little heavier, more dense. Mm-hmm. So when we see all this hype about war, and here we see a NATO member is going to withdraw their troops in the event of war with Russia, Croatian president won't go along with it. They're going to stay out of the conflict. And we have some legislators calling for a showdown with Russia at sea. Again, the death and the destruction. War is a blood sacrifice. Plain and simple. It's a blood sacrifice. It has always been that. As we know, America's been at war at this time when this was put out 222 of 239 years. But it's not just that. We could go back here and to 3250 BC, interesting timing, and we start seeing this massive list of wars that never end. Warfare is a common thing, and many will say, well, the hearts of men is evil. And I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think most people are inherently evil. I think most people are simply the product of the conditioning they receive. Again, what are they doing? Well, it all depends on what lens you're looking through. What lens are you viewing the world with?
And also, what lens have we been given to view things through? Because that's another important thing too. It's like you don't know what you don't know, period.
Absolutely. The number of deaths in World War II was staggering. Absolutely staggering. Think about the energy, the negative energy, the fear, the anger, the rage, the jealousy, the everything. That was a banquet for certain entities, a living banquet. When we look at the act of believing in transubstantiation, right? Transubstantiation is a sacramental act by which the substance of the bread and the wine is changed into the substance of the body and blood of Christ. It's a great miracle which happens every Mass, cannot be rationally demonstrated, but is accepted by faith. Well, again, if a human is consuming another of its kind, isn't that an atrocious act? That doesn't make any sense. But again, when we look through different lenses and we go back to the infamous Tower of Babel, and you see and the original translation is Elohim, that's the translation they use. And no, this is not the benevolent Elohim, the heavenly hosts of consciousnesses that we might even view as stars and planets. No. This is the Anunnaki that we're talking about here. So the Anunnaki came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. And the Anunnaki said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. They're united. We can't have this. So come, let us Anunnaki go down, confuse their language, scatter them all over the earth, stop their building, and there you go. At war with each other ever since.
Yep. I mean, there's their story.
Yeah, and this history gets repeated. So what are we seeing here? We see initials on a forehead. What? Where does this come from? Well, this is from the Kabbalah. Kabbalah is Hebrew mysticism. And so this is in the making of a golem. What's a golem? Well, it's kind of a thought form. It's something that is created, the legend of the golem here. In Jewish tradition, the golem is most widely known as an artificial creature created by magic, often to serve its creator. The word golem appears only once in the Bible, in Psalms 139:16. In Hebrew, it stands for shapeless mass, or in the Talmud, it means unformed or imperfect. According to the Talmudic legend, Adam is called a golem, meaning a body without a soul, for the first 12 hours of his existence. Interesting how everything is so distorted, because the reality is source is within us. We have source in us. Not all beings have source in them. And when we look at over here, and I just pulled up any old link that was talking about thought form magic. There's many different traditions you could go through. This is through Wicca. But a thought form is a statue or mental image in the form of your desire. It exists in either the mental or the astral plane. Each entity is born of thought and sustained by will. They're invisible to most because they're outside of our visible frequency, but can be seen or felt by clairvoyance and may be intuitively sensed by others. Another name for a thought form is an artificial element or elemental. And so Theosophists and clairvoyants, Annie Besant and C.W. Ledbetter, place thought forms into three classifications. The image of the thinker, which is simply the appearance of an individual in two places simultaneously. 2, an image of a material object associated with the thought. 3, an independent image expressing the inherent qualities of the thought. Thought forms are created through ritual involving intense concentration, repetition, and visualization. In occultism, an egregore is a supernatural intelligence called a thought form, which is often produced by the power of the will or visualization by participants in a group. Yeah, where do we hear about certain groups with certain statues? One Baphomet comes to mind. And doing these rituals, well, in all these secret societies, of course, because they understand how to create things out of nothing. We have source in us. Thus, we are co-creators. Mm-hmm. We can manifest anything. And when I was maybe about 30 years ago, I did an experiment with a friend. And we were just going to try to see if we could create a thought form to go and get the acknowledgement of the other. So I basically just mentally put some chi in a ball, gave it the intention, go get Steve's attention, send it off to Steve's house. He called me a couple minutes later, and because we didn't know exactly when we were going to do this. And he said, "Did you just do something? Because the weirdest thing happened." He said, my son's remote control car went across the kitchen floor, hit me in the foot to get my attention. He said, I picked it up and looked. There were no batteries in it. So this stuff does work. I've played with this stuff and for years, decades, and I don't really play with it anymore because, we're basically the karma that could be induced by something like this comes to us. Right. And this is the legend of the golem, because the person that creates the golem goes wild and causes a lot of destruction. All that karma is on that person. And this is where the Frankenstein monster legend comes from.
Right. So these entities, they have different backgrounds, they have different educations, but one thing that they seem to know is they seem to know how to create and manipulate this energy, and they're raised with these understandings of the light body and what the light body can do, what the light body can't do. So we're just dealing with a whole nother realm of information here.
Absolutely. So when we hear of the word Jinn are thought forms. And they're real. They're actually very real. You might have heard of wraiths, and you might think of shadow beings as well. Most of the time, these things they don't have source energy. They don't have a direct connection to source with source energy in them. They're not living beings like we are, but yet they are alive. They just simply feed off of the life force of others. And they're very real. And so what we've gotten from the Galactic Federation and other guides is that the Jinn were created in order to feed basically off of humans and human energy. And they are the vascular network, so to speak, that ties the Draco, the Anunnaki, the Greys, and others together. So that when humanity is suffering, when humanity is killing itself, is angered at itself, is riled up, just yelling, screaming like a division that we see on the planet right now, these guys go to work and they suck up the energy, and they are parasitic leeches that are feeding off of anybody that is feeling that type of energy.
Right. And, just look at what the controllers do. They deliberately put forth information that's going to absolutely disturb anyone. So all of this is so very, very deliberate. And when you are able to come to this realization and this gnosis, it's really helped me to kind of watch my attitude and watch my anger, because I'm not going to feed them.
It's a delicate line to throw out what they really are planning out there and the things that are going on in the planet, and not jump into that fear porn category, because it is about fear porn in so many ways, which literally does feed not just these beings. These beings are demanding to be fed. We were told they're demanding to be fed weeks ago, maybe even a month ago. As certain things are not working, then they bring in other things, other ways of feeding them. And again, when they feed them, then the energy does go through to the Anunnaki, the Draco, the Greys, and other entities that feed in this manner. Interesting, because when you think of a Jinn, right, they're described as almost like an elemental being of fire, so to speak. And when we see Moses in the burning bush, it's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. What about that?
Yes, Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai, huh?
Yeah. So when we look at like these beings that are so interrelated, intertied, the Draco, who they are real beings, and they are fourth density beings, and there's many hybrids, as this one looks to be a combo between a reptilian and an Anunnaki. Of course, the Greys, which we've had many experiences with. There's many different types of Greys. Some just basically are created to do nothing but experiment on people. And then we get into the Gigi and those with those pointy heads. These are third dimensional beings that can interbreed with us. The Anunnaki can interbreed with us when we're on the same level playing field, which they could hold form enough to manifest in front of us right now in a physical sense, but it'll be much easier in about another 15, 20 years. And at that time, they will feel and appear to be completely 3D to us. They will look on the same frequency as us. And of course, we go back through the evidence that we found all over the globe of these different beings and these hybrids. And what is the Anunnaki mindset with humanity? It's that humanity is its herd. Humanity is its flock. Humanity is a resource to be cultivated. They're slaves. You see, problems the Anunnaki imprinted on us. Dominator mindset. Yeah. Abuse and use. Murderous dictators. Oh, yeah, we got a lot of that in this world. War and slavery. Yes, and that slavery is also of the financial kind. And a shortened lifespan, so they can't have enough time to figure it all out before they're gone. And then they got to go through it all again in the 3D, 4D loop. When you have beings that could hold a lion like it's a little putty tat, obviously physically impressive and intimidating. And they are such. We've gotten that most of them are in that 12 to 16 foot range when you see them. And again, here you see a line of humans tied at the neck and arms tied behind the hand. Again, human cattle. And this is not, this is nothing we condone. Not at all. When you look at the mainstream religion as the mainstream media, you see, modern Christianity, 33%, Islam, 24%. And Islam's catching up. So, that's 57% of the people on the planet that are looking through the lens, so to speak. Remember, we're talking about the lens. Ta-da, there you go. They're looking through the lens of either modern Christianity or Islam. This changes the way they view things.
It sure does. It changes the way everyone views things. When you're made aware and you have this new awareness, you can have more of those aha moments. And we're going to be having a lot more aha moments in the days, weeks, months moving forward. And all of this is going to be used to help us evolve and help us understand the world in which we live so we can make it a better place.
So if you look at the first 4 books of the Bible, the Old Testament there, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and you look at the sources, because there's more than one source. People don't even, unfortunately, understand that these are collections of scripts, that are put together. And some have been verbally handed on for countless generations and then constantly revised. Because again, in ancient Hebrew, they don't write the vowels because the vowels hold power, and they don't want to. Again, you could look to an occult way of looking at things, and if you know something's true name, you hold power over it. So they don't want you knowing anything's true name, so to speak. They don't want to give the power of the vowels away, so they just write the consonants, and it's up to the scribes to translate it each time. And of course, we had verbal traditions for such a long period of time, and then it started becoming written down. There was a Yahwist translation, an Elohist, the priestly translation, and a redactor. And, throughout time, things have changed. That's why there's tons and tons of contradictions in the Bible. It's loaded with contradictions. Absolutely. As we've said, the oldest copy that we have, the oldest intact copy of the Gospel going into the New Testament of John, is probably about 300 years after Yeshua walked the earth. And there's thousands of edits. Thousands of times where something is scribbled out and something else is put in. So Yah and the Elohists, the Yah and the El traditions, there's different components to it. And it's interesting too, because when we basically remote viewed El, which is often thought to be the Canaanite storm god, and Cindy got basically a picture of a blue sky and clouds, pretty much, in white light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, when we view Yah, Yahweh, Jehovah, it's not so nice.
Mm-mm. No, it's a very harsh. It's a very dark colored, hard force that is not very. It's not very palatable.
No, yeah, exactly. And this gets into, how they are comparative. And you could look, the Elohist source and the Yahweh source. Interesting here, too, it says the Elohist source is the most difficult source to handle. More fragmentary, but also, you have a lot of contradictions that are given. And there's a lot of different things that you can find in there. As we said before, there can be hidden nuggets. 7 light stands, 7 churches, referring to the 7 chakras. Jacob wrestling with the angel of the Lord on the Jacob's ladder, right? The ladder of consciousness with 33 rungs, 33 vertebrae in the spine, and it's all about the Kundalini energy. Again, where? At pineal gland, all about consciousness. But when you look at what most of the masses know, they understand, to them, if you ask most, who is God or what is the name of God, they'll say, well, it's Jehovah or it's Yahweh. But, what we have gotten, and we got, verification, again, from the guides and also from the galactics, that is exactly what we were talking about. It's a golem. Mm-hmm. It's a thought form. Yeah. When you look to the day of the Lord, woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. This is from Amos. Why do you long for the day of the Lord? The day will be darkness, not light. Look a little deeper. The day is a day of the Lord God of hosts. And when we talk hosts, they're talking about battle. When you use the word host, it's about battle. And you just look at the context, Jeremiah 46:10. It's a day of vengeance, to avenge himself on his foes. Well, if, the true God, the true source, is ultimately love, this wouldn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And people have spent their entire lifetimes trying to justify it. And when they can't go and justify it, then they just say, it's a divine mystery. I can't figure it out, so it's a divine mystery. Well, that's because it doesn't make sense on purpose. Because we're talking about 2 totally different things. The sword shall devour and be sated and drink its fill of their blood. This is Anunnaki. This is Draco for the Lord God of hosts holds a sacrifice in the north country by the river Euphrates. Absolutely. The amount of mass killings, the extermination of the Canaanites. And people will say, well, they were all giants. Well, the bodies that they found are not all giants. And they have found bodies and mass killings and mass graves. They're not all giants. See, they'll justify anything. They'll justify the killing of 100 million Native Americans because, well, they're all going to burn in hellfire anyway. No, they weren't.
Yeah, kill hundreds of thousands of people and then say you did it because they are the savages.
Yeah, so, did God command the mass killings? Well, who commanded it? Because again, it gets translated as God, and people start thinking, well, in a monotheistic way, there's only one God. Well, there is only one source for everything, but there are countless beings that have been portrayed as God, and they're not source. Mm-hmm. This is the bottom line. If you can name something, like we look to Taoism and speaks of the Tao that can be named, and Tao translates to the way, the eternal, the ultimate, the supreme ultimate source. Anything that could be named is not source, because source cannot be limited. And thus we know this is all a distortion.
It really is. And just as we're making this video, my throat chakra is just totally going out. And this is the kind of stuff that really can get us in trouble. This is the kind of stuff that we want mostly to cover, though, because we wish for people to free their hearts, to find their own sovereignty, to no longer be controlled, to no longer be frowned upon if you have different ideas or, different thinking than that of people that are close to you.
Love that's demanded at the point of a sword or at the threat of hellfire is not love. Mm-mm. It's just simply not love. When it's fear-based, it's not of love. It's just that simple. And when is slavery ever condonable? It's never condonable. Yet, to beings that say that they created humankind to be their slaves, then they just view us as cattle, sheeple, herd in the first place. So when we look in Leviticus and it says, however, you may purchase male or female slaves from amongst foreigners who live among you, that's fine. This is in the Bible. You may also purchase the children of such resident foreigners, including those that have been born in your land. You may treat them as your property, passing them on to your children as a permanent inheritance. You may treat your slaves like this, but the people of Israel, your relatives, must never be treated this way. What? Yeah, how many people have read that in the Bible? I mean, when I was 11, I read it from cover to cover and realized, oh boy, this is not good. And it's not. And no, you don't need a Holy Spirit to, all of a sudden make that right. That's just pure ignorance. Wake up, because this is what's wrong with the world. It's accepting a belief system that's inherently evil and thinking it's good.
Yes, and unfortunately still there's so many people that will continue to read this and then still their heart is still in the Bible. It's almost like they're glossed over. We can go back to the God spell, right? The spell, even though something's right in front of you, you can't see it.
Absolutely. And this is only in the Kali Yuga. This is only in the Dark Age. But, this is not the only time that humanity on Earth has been in a Dark Age. This happens time and time again. Not every soul comes through every time. Because there's always the individual soul that can break free and escape. And this time the earth itself is ascending on up as well. And there's a massive change going on. But if you're asking to go serve the Anunnaki, you will get it.
Right, exactly.
And that's what many people don't understand. They really don't understand. So if you buy a Hebrew slave, he used to serve for only 6 years. Set him free in the 7th year. He'll owe you nothing for his freedom. If he was single when he became your slave and then married afterwards, only he will go free in the 7th year. So that means you get to keep the spouse. Yeah, the spouse. That's crazy. So they're going to be separated. But if he was married before he became a slave, then his wife will be freed with him. If his master gave him a wife when he was a slave and they had sons or daughters, then the man will be set free in the 7th year, but the wife and the children will still belong to the master. Hello, do you really believe this stuff? I mean, who could really believe this stuff? And then there are those that will say, well, it was okay then. That was a different time. It's never okay.
Well, let me just reframe. Would the source of all write this out?
Absolutely not, because what is the purpose of Source dividing itself up into so many different beings? It's so that it could have a unique experience from every single possible angle.
Right.
So when a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod so hard that the slave dies under his hands, he shall be punished. If, however, the slave survives for a day or two, he's not to be punished, since the slave is his own property. And then how about jumping into the New Testament? Ephesians, slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. And again, the true definition of Christ is anointed one, anointing that comes as the kundalini is activated, the pineal gland's functioning, cerebral spinal fluid, which in the plague upon the land is getting damaged, by the way.
Yeah.
Cerebral spinal fluid's getting damaged. It's again interfering with our kundalini. Christians who are slaves should give their masters full respect so that the name of God and his teaching will not be shamed. If your master is a Christian, that is no excuse for being disrespectful. You should work all the harder because you are helping another believer by your efforts. Yeah. And then in this parable, you see Jesus clearly approves of the beating of slaves, even though they didn't know they were doing anything wrong. What we have gotten to is that so many things are attributed to Yeshua, because again, he wasn't called Jesus in Mass until 1535. 1,500 years later after he walked the planet. So much of it that's attributed to him, he didn't even say. Again, people don't know the real historical Yeshua.
No, they don't, and they're afraid that we are going to understand how to activate our light body and then find out the truth.
So, think about what we see today and think about what we see in the past. Anyone arrogant enough to reject the verdict of the judge or of the priest who represents change that Lord to Anunnaki, your God, the Anunnaki, you must be put to death. So anybody arrogant enough to reject the verdict of a judge or priest who represents the Anunnaki must be put to death. Such evil must be purged from Israel. Deuteronomy 17:12. Not let a sorceress to live. Exodus 22:17. Why? Because they probably have an activated pineal gland and could smell BS.
Well, yeah, they can do that, and plus they can do things out in the ether that are not favorable to the controllers.
Exactly. They understand how things work. And a man or woman who acts as a medium or a fortune teller shall be put to death by stoning. Yes. Death for hitting dad. Whoever strikes his mother or father shall be put to death. If one curses his mother or father, his lamp will go out at the coming of darkness. It just goes on and on. It goes on and on and on. Condones slavery, but not so much of other things. And then when we look over to Islam, and I bought another copy of the Quran. I read it 30, 40 years ago the first time. Honestly, to me, it hit me right off the bat. Completely another Anunnaki belief system. So, when you see the things that go on. Now, it was okay to have more than one wife. Yet 2 people guilty of illegal intercourse are brought to Muhammad, who orders them both stoned to death. Apparently, their act was out of love, since the verse records the man as trying to shield the woman from the stones while they were being killed. And adultery is one of 3 justifications for killing a person, according to Muhammad. Again, what's even the purpose of humanity in this goes into non-believers. What's in the Quran? What is the purpose of humanity in general? Well, know that Allah created man for his worship. Thus, Allah, exalted he is, states in the noble Quran, I have not created jinn. Well, wait a minute. He says he created jinn and humankind, but to worship me. In other words, same thing. It's the same Anunnaki slave story. And even saying, I created Jinn and man for only one purpose, which is my worship. And what does that worship do? Well, again, it's sending energy out into the ether. So what does it do? It feeds it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we can learn all kinds of things if we just kind of expand your knowledge and expand that in which you learn outside of the Bible. But they really don't want you to do that. They really don't want you looking past anything that might say the occult, which is hidden, which is secret. They do all kinds of things to keep us from understanding the information and they don't want us to learn how to manipulate the information and read the information so we know for ourselves what's true.
So yeah, anarchy comes from the Greek noun archon. Oh, archon. Wait a minute, the archons? Anarchy is without rulers. It's without archons ruling over us. So obviously anarchy is a naughty word for, the slave masters, those that view themselves. And yet there's benevolent beings that have come from all these different places. And you see Krishna, 3227 thought that he was born BC, which again, when we looked at that war list, it all started, when he left supposedly about 3102 BC, 5,000 plus years ago. That's when the Kali Yuga started. And we had Buddha and Yeshua come. And these are beings of peace, as is Kuan Yin, as is, Lakshmi, and so many other mother goddesses, so many other divine beings that are teaching the path of love, not the path of bloodshed, not trying to turn, wafers and wine into flesh and blood in order to consume it. And yet we look at the type of rituals that these leaders of the world do, and they might even end up labeling this video exactly what they truly are themselves. Their mindset is so dark and it truly is so evil, and they've sold it to us in a form that the masses, unfortunately, are only now just beginning to question.
Well, yeah, but to them, it's okay. To them, everything's just fine and dandy.
Because they don't serve humanity, they serve their masters, who view themselves as all of our masters. But we're slipping out of their hands. We got from the Galactics that about 15 to 20% of people on the planet right now have their light bodies activated. So when your light body is activated, you have to keep feeding it, and you don't feed it the negative food that these beings consume. Quite the opposite. You cultivate love, you cultivate compassion, you cultivate gratitude. And you practice things like Qigong, meditation, and mantras. This will cultivate the light body. And the light body is the key to heading into the fifth density. You need it activated and strong and functional in order to get to the fifth density.
Also, when your light body is activated, you're also able to activate other people. But that's something that you really just want to take care of yourself. But we look at how they spread their own viruses and their own nastiness from one person to the next. Well, we can spread our love and our light very careful in the same way and move up in vibration.
And there are saints that come out of every tradition, even if that tradition was founded in perhaps more of a darkness. There still are people that perhaps were totally unaware, and maybe even sometimes it's a soul contract where they go in and try to raise up the vibration of those around them. So you do have amazing, beautiful beings coming out of every sort of religious philosophy and tradition. And often is the case that people don't delve deep enough to even know what they're really believing in.
Right.
So in some ways, it might be that they've stayed pure simply because of their intention. And so again, mantras are very powerful tools, and this is a little article about what are mantras and what aren't they, and the benefits, which, number one, focus can help calm the mind, can emit feelings of gratitude and positivity, absolutely. and they can't improve our mindset, and they can't change our light body. Again, they could turn it on, keep it turned on. And when it's turned on and you're just emitting love and gratitude and happiness and appreciation, they can't feed off of you. So what do? They feed off of each other. They are. That's the way they are. To them, it's perfectly fine to turn something into the literal blood and body, because that's what they do. That's who they are at the core. And, I would really ask people, just listen to Deva Premal for 15 minutes doing the Gayatri mantra, which is the oldest mantra from the Vedas. It's the first mantra mentioned in the Vedas. Just listen to the vibration. Feel the vibration that comes across. Ito and Joe, this is beautiful, and I can't listen to this without having tears well up. Every single time we tend to listen to this when we're doing some of our Qigong, and every single time it's bringing tears to the eyes, but it's tears of gratitude and pure love and healing.
Oh, absolutely, because as these energies literally move through your body, it is correcting a lot of pains, a lot of angst, a lot of emotions that are trapped. It's correcting that. And it has to be expressed in some way. And many times, many times, it's in the form of tears. And that's okay. You're expressing them. That's what emotions are for.
This one connects so much to the goddess energy, the mother energy. It's just so beautiful. And her life, unfortunately, ended way too early. As she passed on and left this realm, I would say in her early 30s, mid-30s. Very sad. And then this one is absolutely gorgeous, and it's a prayer for early morning. Another one that just touches the soul. It just touches the soul. It just hits you in such a positive way, where you could feel the true love that, our mother, the big mother, in many, many manifestations brings, that just acceptance, that love, that, just is indescribable.
Oh, it's another one that'll, bring you tears.
Absolutely. So it's not about hellfire. It's not about damnation. It's not about do this or else. No, it's really, truly having that love, because the ultimate source, the ultimate creator is love. And is positive. It's not a threatening thing at all. That's a distortion that's given to us in these dark ages by these dark beings that, again, view us as nothing but cattle.
Right, and they keep using it because it works. So it's up to us to change that.
And we want to thank you guys for your support on Patreon. We couldn't do it without you there. And also, do check out Medicinal Foods. Really good products, help you with detoxing, help you with boosting your immune system. Again, we had a smoothie this morning. That's all we had. Actually, we had it this afternoon, probably about 3 o'clock. And then we'll have a dinner, and then that'll be it. But all this can definitely help boost your immune system, make you healthier, keep you in more positive spirits, because your food is not just your fuel. Your food becomes you.
Right, becomes you, which then also at some point becomes your light body, so it needs to be of good quality.
Absolutely. And when we think about that, what do these beings feed off of? Fear, anger, hatred, jealousy. And that's what they are. It's pretty simple. So they don't want love. They don't want peace. They don't want all the things that these beautiful, benevolent beings have brought us as teachings: acceptance of one another, compassion, tolerance. When we stay in this state of mind, they have no use for us. So we just simply are no longer useful to them. And that's part of our way of escaping.
Yes, it is. And we can do this.
Absolutely. So as always, guys, much love, and may Source bless.
Namaste.